All right, let's talk about one of the biggest things humanity could ever do. How do we actually survive and build a life on another planet? We're going to go way beyond just the rockets and get into the real nuts and bolts of building a brand new world completely from scratch. So let's just start with this. I want you to imagine for a second that you're in charge. You've got to pack everything, and I mean everything, to start a new civilization. We're talking food, water, air, every tool, all the building materials. The list just goes on, and the weight is, well, it's astronomical. I mean, where would you even begin?
Well, here's the crazy part. The real answer isn't about what you pack. It can't be. The costs, the sheer logistics of launching that much stuff from Earth, it's just impossible. So the only way it works, the only viable strategy, is to show up with the absolute bare minimum and build literally everything else from what you find when you get there.
And this kind of gets at the deeper why of it all. This isn't just some massive engineering problem, right? It's a huge step for humanity. The idea here is that going out into the cosmos might actually force us to look back and see ourselves as just one species, all in it together against this vast, incredible universe.
Okay, so before we can even think about building, we have to pick a spot. And that search doesn't start with a planet. It actually starts with a star. And right away, you're faced with this really fascinating choice. On the one hand, we could look for a G-type star, just like our own sun. It's stable, it's predictable, we know for a fact that it works. The problem? They're not that common. On the other hand, we could go for an M-dwarf star. These are by far the most common type of star in the galaxy. But, and it's a big but, they're incredibly volatile. They're known for these violent flares that could just rip a planet's atmosphere right off. So what do? Do you go for the safe bet that's hard to find, or the much more common but really dangerous option?
So let's say we've picked our destination. Now, the real work can begin. And the number one rule, the guiding principle for all of it, is actually pretty simple. You have to live off the land.
And this whole idea has a name, of course. It's called in situ resource utilization, or ISRU for short. And honestly, this is the concept that makes any of this remotely possible. It's all about turning alien rocks, dust, and maybe some ice into everything you need. I'm talking breathable air, rocket fuel, and of course, building materials.
And this number right here, this shows you exactly why ISRU isn't just a nice idea, it's absolutely essential. This gear ratio means that for every single kilogram of something, say oxygen, that you can make on Mars, you save yourself from having to launch up to 10 kilograms all the way from Earth. Think about that. When a return trip needs like 30 tons of oxygen, the savings are just staggering. ISRU isn't a convenience, it's the only thing that makes this affordable or even scalable.
So, how do we actually build our new homes? Well, this is where things get really, really cool. This is where science fiction starts to become science fact. We're talking about turning this alien landscape into basically your personal hardware store.
You know what the most abundant resource on any rocky planet or moon is? It's the ground right under your feet. It's called regolith. And this loose mix of rock and dust is going to be the main ingredient for a whole bunch of really futuristic construction methods.
Okay, this is one of the most incredible ideas. We could literally grow our buildings. The concept is you take fungal mycelium, that's basically the root system of a fungus, and you mix it with some locally grown plant matter to make a kind of paste. Then you can 3D print a structure with it. The fungus then grows all through the material, binding it together into this really strong, lightweight, and super insulating material. How cool is that?
Now, another way to do it is to make a kind of lunar concrete. You mix the regolith with a chemical activator, something like sodium hydroxide, and a superplasticizer to make it flow. And get this, what's a great superplasticizer that's going to be available in a new colony? Urea, which yes, can be easily extracted from astronaut urine. Seriously, nothing goes to waste.
For a more high-tech solution, you can find regolith that's rich in basalt, melt it down, and pull it into these super thin, continuous fibers. Then you can have a robotic arm weave these fibers into these incredibly complex and beautiful structures that are super lightweight but have enormous tensile strength. This is perfect for things like pressurized habitats that need to be really, really strong.
So the main thing to understand here is that you don't just pick one method. A real habitat is going to be a system of layers all working together. You might have an inner structure made of woven fibers for holding in air pressure, then a layer of 3D printed regolith for strength, and then you pile on a really thick outer layer of just loose dirt for one absolutely critical reason: radiation shielding.
Okay, great. So you've built your house. You've got a roof over your head,
But surviving is about so much more than that. You've really just unlocked a whole new level of challenges.
This is basically the new hierarchy of survival. First things first, power. You need a reliable source that runs 24/7, and that almost certainly means a compact nuclear fission reactor. Second, life support. You need a completely closed-loop system that recycles every single drop of water and every molecule of air. Nothing can be wasted. And finally, food. That means soilless farming, things like hydroponics and aeroponics, to grow everything you need to eat.
And you have to do all of this perfectly while you're dealing with this constant barrage of threats. There's deadly radiation from space. There's the risk of micrometeorite impacts. You've got these insane temperature swings. There's the constant nagging risk of a critical piece of equipment failing, communication blackouts with Earth. And layered on top of all of that is the deep, profound psychological stress of being totally isolated, millions of miles from everything you've ever known.
What you know brings us to the final and maybe the most difficult piece of this entire puzzle. Once we figure out how to survive physically, how do we survive each other? The legal groundwork is already, shall we say, complicated. The classic Outer Space Treaty from back in 1967 basically says space belongs to everyone and nobody can own it. But then you have the much more recent Artemis Accords, which a lot of countries have signed, and they say, yeah, but we have the right to extract and use resources we find. So which is it? Is space a global commons, or is it finders keepers? A new colony is going to be born right in the middle of that argument.
And the colony's own government is going to have to change over time. It'll probably start out as a really rigid directorate, with an appointed commander whose only job is to keep everyone alive. But as the colony gets bigger, maybe it becomes a charter colony with a council that represents different groups. And then finally, if it ever becomes truly self-sufficient, it could grow into a fully self-governing commonwealth with its own elected government. Planning for that evolution from the start is going to be critical to avoid serious conflict down the road.
But in the end, this is the hope, right? That the sheer mind-boggling scale of the universe and this incredible shared challenge of survival will just make our earthbound argument seem, well, small. And that it might just push us all toward a much more unified future.
So that really leaves us with this one big question. It feels like we're getting closer and closer to solving the technology problems of living on other worlds. But the real test, it isn't about the engineering or the geology. It's about us. Can we actually build a better, more resilient, more collaborative society when we're so far from home? Are we really ready to build not just a new home, but a new humanity?